Archives of Prasar Bharati presents the timeless treasure of golden era.
I have spoken about freedom in my lifetime. Your struggle, your commitment, and your discipline towards freedom and justice is irreversible.
Nelson Mandela was born Roohilala Mandela on July 18, 1918, in the tiny village of Maveso, on the banks of the Mabashe River in Transkei, South Africa. When Mandela was 9 years old, his father died of lung disease, causing his life to change dramatically. He was adopted by Chief Jogindaba Dilindiabo, the acting regent of the Thembu people, a gesture done as a favor to Mandela's father, who years earlier had recommended Jogindaba be made chief. Mandela took classes in one-room school next to the palace, studying English, Xhosa, history, and geography. It was during this period that Mandela developed an interest in African history. He learned how the African people had lived in relative peace until the coming of the white people. He then enrolled at the University of Witwatersrand in Johannesburg to study law. He founded the law firm Mandela and Tambo, partnering with Oliver Tambo, a brilliant student he had met while attending Fort Hare. The law firm provided free and low-cost legal counsel to unrepresented blacks. Mandela soon became actively involved in the anti-apartheid movement, joining the African National Congress in 1942. For 20 years, Mandela directed peaceful, non-violent acts of defiance against the South African government and its racist policies, including the 1952 Defiance Campaign and the 1955 Congress of the People. In 1956, Mandela and 150 others were arrested and charged with treason for their political advocacy. In 1958, Mandela wed Winnie Madikizela, and the couple had two daughters, Zenani and Zinzitswa. In 1961, Mandela, who was formally committed to non-violent protest, began to believe that armed struggle was the only way to achieve change.
There are many people who feel that it is useless and futile for us to continue talking peace and non-violence against a government whose reply is only savage attacks on an unarmed and defenseless people. And I think the time has come for us to consider, in the light of our experiences in this stay at home, whether the methods which we have applied so far are adequate.
In 1963, Mandela was brought to trial imprisonment for political offenses, including sabotage. Nelson Mandela was incarcerated on Robben Island for 18 of his 27 years in prison.
My husband has been fighting for the liberation of the African people, for the working harmoniously of all the racial groups in this country. I shall never lose hope, and my people shall never lose hope. In fact, we expect that the work will go on. my mother tried getting us into schools in Soweto. And the black principals then were very scared of police harassment. They were afraid to take us because one or two had already experienced, harassment from the security police for having us there. Then we had to use, we changed our surnames, and my mother took us to, a colored school in town. And there as well, the security police caught up with us and, had us kicked out of that school. And this went on and on in about 6 or 7 schools here in South Africa, in town, where we were just chucked out. We wouldn't even spend a month, we'd be kicked out. Until such time that some friends of my mother's heard about our plight, and then they offered to have us educated in Swaziland. I was never there as a mother to shape them. I was never there as a mother to hold my little girls' hands, take them to school and introduce them to their teachers, as is the glory of every mother. When your children are starting school, each mother looks forward so much to that day when her little girl is taken to school. I've never entered any of the schools which have been attended by my children.
He suffered the rigors of apartheid. He was a man believing in violence. He was sent to Robben Island, which was a South African whites' prison, 20 miles away from the Cape Town, and the sea was full of sharks. And Nelson Mandela was pushed into a cell with only one little window to the world. When he was brought out of the cell, he used to cut stones in the quarries of Robben Island. He suffered for years and years and years there, and out of that suffering comes a man of peace.
President Frederick William de Klerk announced Mandela's release on February 11, 1990. De Klerk also unbanned the ANC, removed restrictions on political groups, and suspended executions.
We are going forward. The march towards freedom and justice.
India is the first country which Nelson Mandela visited after his release from prison. He was given affectionate and grand welcome in India. Mandela was greatly influenced by Mahatma Gandhi.
We in South Africa owe much to the presence of Gandhi in our midst for 21 years. His influence was felt by freedom struggles throughout the African continent for a good part of the 20th century. And he greatly inspired the struggle in South Africa led by the African National Congress. His philosophy contributed in no small measure to bringing about a peaceful transformation in South Africa.
He came to Delhi Doordarshan studios during his visit.
What a joy that you should be with us. You come to us in some ways as a return of Mahatma Gandhi.
The sentiments that you have expressed are mutual. Our sense of gratitude to the people of India are beyond words. The organized political struggle in our country was, as you know, started by none other than Mahatma Gandhi.
Was one of the most iconic figures of the 20th century. And the way in which he fought for freedom from apartheid will remain one of the great sagas in world history. And it was such a joy to meet with him because despite all these years of incarceration, he had no trace of bitterness, no trace of anger. He was a truly great man. He was able to overcome the horror of having been in solitary confinement probably for 30 years or something. But he came out absolutely clean, absolutely psychologically strong. There is so much violence and so much hatred and so much conflict in the world today that people like Gandhiji and Nelson Mandela are people who have to be remembered every day if this world is ever to become a peaceful place.
In a glittering ceremony held at Ashoka Hall, Rashtrapati Bhavan in October 1990, Dr. Mandela was conferred with Bharat Ratna Award, the highest civilian award in India. In 1991, Mandela was elected President of the African National Congress, with lifelong friend and colleague Oliver Tambo serving as national chairperson. In 1993, Mandela and President de Klerk were jointly awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for their work toward dismantling apartheid. On April 27, 1994, South Africa held its first democratic elections.
Will you please raise your right hand and say...
Nelson Mandela was announced the country's first black president on May 10, 1994, at the age of 77, with de Klerk as his first deputy. From 1994 until June 1999, Mandela worked to bring about the transition from minority rule and apartheid to black majority rule. In 1995, South Africa came to the world stage by hosting the Rugby World Cup, which brought further recognition and prestige to the young republic. He used the nation's enthusiasm for sports as a pivot point to promote reconciliation between whites and blacks, encouraging black South Africans to support the once-hated national rugby team. Mandela also worked to protect South Africa's economy from collapse during his presidency. Through his Reconstruction and Development Plan, the South African government funded the creation of jobs, housing, and basic health care.
Mandela remained president for 5 years, and this 5 years saw many of the major institutional mechanisms of democratic South Africa being created and ushering in this transition in which multi-ethnic South Africa, a democracy, and more or less a federation could be created, which is the way deep divisions in society and inclusive social order can all be created. And that, I think, remains his principal contribution, besides his struggle for freedom and anti-apartheid and end of racism in South Africa.
In addition to advocating for peace and equality on both a national and global scale, in his later years, Mandela remained committed to the fight against AIDS. By the 1999 general election, Nelson Mandela had retired from active politics. He continued to maintain a busy schedule, however, raising money to build schools and clinics in South Africa's rural heartland through his foundation.
So much has been said and written about him that I would prefer to share in very simple language who this great man was. He was indeed the crusader against injustice, racial discrimination, apartheid, and exploitation. And in that sense, he was very much like Mahatma Gandhi, and therefore he has been called the Gandhi of Africa.
On December 5th, 2013, at the age of 95, Nelson Mandela died at his home in Johannesburg, South Africa. Important leaders from all over the world attended and paid their glorifying tribute to Mandela. He was given state funeral with full honors.
In the absence of this icon of humanity, struggler, fighter, crusader against all injustice, the whole world bows down and remembers the contribution of this great personality. And after the demise of Mahatma Gandhi, we did not have anyone like him.
For the people of South Africa, for those he inspired around the globe, Madiba's passing is rightly a time of mourning and a time to celebrate a heroic life. But I believe it should also prompt in each of us a time for self-reflection. With honesty, regardless of our station or our circumstance, we must ask, how well have I applied his lessons in my own life?
Nelson Mandela will be remembered for many things. He will be certainly remembered for the way he led, his dignity, his extraordinary understanding, not just of how to bring democracy and freedom to his beloved South Africa, but how important it was that he first brought freedom to himself.
Wherever we are in the country, wherever we are in the world, let us reaffirm his vision of a society in which none is exploited, oppressed, or dispossessed by another. For decades to come, Nelson Mandela will continue to be a source of inspiration for civil rights activists worldwide. In 2009, Mandela's birthday, that is 18th of July, was declared Mandela Day, an international day to promote global peace and celebrate the South African leader's legacy.